too smooth, that mud talking to have your ass in a wreck. Who's signing your check? Pussy better do what he says. We shutting down shows. Ain't gotta put no price in your head. Man, I'm coming for your tongue for all that shit that you said.
Gonna make the profiles boom, 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 boom. What it is, I'm gonna tell you exactly what it is, and then I'm gonna tell you what it ain't. What it is real talk by a real one in real life doing real things. And oh yes, today I have a real profile about a real individual. What it ain't is bullshit. Nope, suck it. The wind's blowing. It's never gonna be no bullshit right here on Gunner's Profiles. I'm gonna give it to you with no added preservatives, raw and real. And that's the only way I can do it. And today, as you can tell by that thumbnail, we are talking about an Emero, a real one, right? One of the founding members of the Mexican Mafia. Yes, indeed, La M. This man himself, a very well-respected individual within his organization and basically within the California penal system. This man is a legendary figure when it comes to that organization down south. Yes, we're talking about Rodolfo Cadena, also known as Mr. Cheyenne, right? Now, Cheyenne, you know, he grew up and was born and raised in San Antonio, Texas. You know, he was born April 15, 1943. And as a young kid, a Tejano, you know, he grew up with a hardworking, strong family ties, strong background, real life shit, right? Wasn't no bullshit with this familia. A traditional old Mexicano family where the father and the mother, they toiled in that soil. They worked hard to raise their children. And you know, a lot of us can identify with that. A lot of us have parents that really got out there and busted their ass and made things happen in a menudo style, in a direct fashion. So that way we have frijoles and con tortillas right there on our plato every night. And he had this type of family. You know, he came from a very historical family, a family that believed a lot in their history and their cultura, and they taught him this. So at a very young age, this was instilled in his mind and indoctrinated to care about where you came from and to care about your gente, your brown people. And this is what Cheyenne predicated and based his fucking life on. Now, of course, at the age of 13, his family moved to Bakersfield, California. His family were migrant workers that followed the farms, you know, and so they decided that if for no other reason, they should go work in Bakersfield, California. Now, you got to understand, back in these days, Bakers was a lot different than what it is today. There wasn't as many gangs, but there were barrios already established. Yes, indeed, I wrote graffiti. This is prior Sureño, Norteño movements. They were just old school barrios. And at the age of 14, he joined a barrio called Barrio Viejo Bakers, right? Or Despensa, Barrio Viejo Gang. And it's a very well-known barrio that nowadays has changed its name to become known as Barrio Bakers, right? I met a lot of these guys doing time in YA. That was my first interaction with vatos from Bakersfield, the 805 area at that time. I know they're the 661 now. And I will say this, that Bakersfield always held their own. They were always vicious with it. And I got a lot of respect for the vatos out of the city of Bakers. Colonia, Lomita, Okie Bakers. What else would they have? Bakers Trece, Barrio Bakers. A lot of these neighborhoods held it down. You know, they held it down. Them being closer up north on that borderline with Delano, they were always the ones, man, that would come to NRCC when I was in CYA, and these are the ones that we would engage in war with. And they always were down for their cause. They were always considered themselves Southern California, the Sur, and at the same time, man, they were down to wiggle in a Northern fashion, meaning that we could do it, whatever, however you guys want to do it, we got it too. And I remember, man, going through a lot of beef with them. So they're about to move to Bakersfield. And, of course, he gets caught up, and at the age of 16, he finds himself in Dole Vocational Institution. For those of you that don't know, that's DVI. That's Tracy Prison, which was one of the main facilities they would send everyone to at this time. It was a reception center, and also being one of the largest prisons in California, having one of the biggest yards. It was a treacherous and dangerous place. Being the tender young age of 16, this is where they sent him to. Now, this is where the legend of Cheyenne begins. Okay, you got to understand, he was already instilled with that mindset of a brown person, having a lot of brown power, a lot of brown pride. This is the familia he comes from. This is his roots, right? So he gets into prison and things are changing and times are changing. At this time, a lot of the Mexicanos were being oppressed. They were looked at as paisas. They were looked at as people that you can get over on. But at the same time, man, all Mexicanos have that warrior blood in them. And a group of Chicanos Mexicanos and Chicanos decided to come together to form a new group, a super group of Mexicanos that would protect other Latino inmates, you know, from persecution, oppression, being preyed upon. Because at these times, the white inmates as well as the Africano inmates were the dominant groups, and they were preying on the Latinos. Latinos not being able to speak English, not being able to fend for themselves because they were all spread out coming from different regions. And Mexico, these Chicanos decided from LA and different areas that they would come together and form this group calling themselves La M, okay, the Mexican Mafia. And we can get into the history of Mexican Mafia, which we will quite extensively. We'll profile it here, but that's neither here nor there right now at this point in time. We're talking about one Cheyenne. So Cheyenne helps formulate this group, helps form the Mexican Mafia, him and a couple other individuals. Now, at this time, he was still a youngster. Okay, so he was still a youngster, and he was pushing this movement, and he believed that this movement was for the helping, the helping of all Chicanos and all Mexicanos within the California prison system. This was the foundation for which he set forth on. This was his mission in life, was to protect his own gente. Him being young and having that mindset, man, he was looked at with a lot of reverence. He was looked at with a lot of loyalty, a lot of juice. He had a lot going on. Vatos praised him. Vatos respected him. Now, respect is a very key word, especially when you're in prison, in life in general. But sabes que in prison, first and foremost, respect is what you base your name on. If you have that respect, if you're a righteous individual, if you carry yourself a certain way, people will respect you, and you see it will take you a long ways in life. So this is what the Vato based his whole life on. Eventually, at the age of 16, about 16 and a half, they ship him to San Quentin. Now, everyone knows that at this time, San Quentin, Folsom, Chino, these prisons were the most notorious prisons in California prison system at that time. There were no Pelican Bays yet. There were no high deserts. There were no fucking other prisons. What there was these set prisons, these old school pintas where a lot of convicts and pintos did their time. So things were different. This is a different time era. This is the late 50s, early 60s. The Mexican Mafia is now established. They're starting to spread their roots and to recruit people. So of course, Cheyenne, being one of the founding members, was looked at as basically one of the founding fathers. His voice was being heard even at a young age. So there's a story that goes that he gets to the yard in San Quentin, and he's approached by a 300 big old buff Africano, who approaches him and figures, man, that the oppression is going to be real today. So he was going to try to get it in style, right? This was not to be the case. Absolutely not. Especially with an Emero that's, as prominent as this figure was. This Vato approached him and tried to come at him a certain way in a disrespectful manner, thinking that because he was a young kid, man, he was just going to fall into the lap of this individual. That was not to be the case with Cheyenne. Cheyenne was a very quiet and humbled person, but when he spoke, people heard what he had to say, right? He was a very intelligent kid. So what he did is he went back to his cell, fashioned him up a little pico de gallo, a little pedazo, came back on the yard in Quentin, in the big yard, and hit this Vato profusely over and over again until the guy succumbed to his wounds. There was over 1,000 people that were on the yard this day, and not one single person said anything. Reason being, Sasuke, they didn't want that smoke with the mob. And second, this was not the old school ways. See, back then, people didn't just tell on you. The telling wasn't rampant. There was a convict code there. If someone approached you in a certain manner and you felt disrespected and you handled your business, Sasuke, that was their business. They handled it. It was on from there, and let's do it pushing. And that's exactly what happened in this case. Now, of course, what happens throughout the system is more Vatos start to be recruited into the mob, into the Mafia. And Cheyenne, of course, as he's getting older and he's doing this time, he's starting to be looked at more and more as a Vato that is really revered, right? And when I say revered, I mean very, very, very well respected, and he was considered at one point in time to be the ultimate supreme authority within the mob. Now, you got to understand at these times, it was a little bit different. Everybody is created and treated equal within the organization. I don't want to speak on too much of the rules and regulations within that organization, because it's not for me to speak on. But I just will say that he was a Vato about his issue, right? And he was in the leadership. Now, about this time, what happens is he's starting to look around, and a new group has formed, a group that calls themselves La Nuestra Familia. The Nuestra Familia has formed, and of course, a lot of the Vatos, especially one Joe Morgan, wasn't feeling that. He wasn't feeling that. He felt like they worked hard to establish their roots. They worked hard to establish, these different pintas and set their foundation, man, so that no one fucked with them. And they had a very treacherous and dangerous organization. They were known to ask no questions and tell no lies. They were known to hit right on the spot. So I was scared. These Vatos didn't play. Anyone that knows the plight and the history and the cultura of what these guys were doing knows that these were not the individuals to be played with. The Black Hand, also known as the Black Hand, the Mexican mob, were very dangerous and very about their business. So at the same time, what had happened was Cheyenne started to indulge himself in a lot of literature, a lot of brown beret literature, a lot of Chicanismo, Chicano movement. And he started to partake in a lot of things on the calles, from the inside. He started to write a lot of these Latino groups, and he was pushing forth the Raza movement. And he had this idea, man, that if they could bring the Nuestra Familia into the fold and there could somehow be some type of truce, some type of togetherness, man, this could form a super group. Okay, a group of all Latinos together, how it was originally based on and supposed to be, you know, to fight the oppressions of these other gangs, these other groups. If they could all somehow come together, he was willing to be the spokesman on the forefront for the mob to let these Vatos know, man, that it was all good. Now, of course, a lot of these individuals that were with the M at the time didn't want that to happen. They liked the way things were going. They weren't tripping off these Vatos from up north, right? But you got to understand at this time, the mob up north, meaning the Nuestra Familia, wasn't necessarily from up north. See, that's a big misconception. Vatos got the game all fucked up, right? These Vatos were Vatos from the south. Vatos from Clanton. Yes, indeed. Vatos from Chiques. Vatos from Logan and San Diego. Vatos from Pomona. These were the individuals that made up and formulated this group, also known as Nuestra Familia, right? People will like to say, and there's a big misconception, oh, they're dropouts from the M. And no, they were never in the M. These were guys that decided that if for no other reason they should do their own thing because certain rules and regulations and things they didn't want to adhere to, they didn't participate in, so they decided to form their own group. So nobody was dropping out of nowhere. At this time, people weren't doing all that. What was happening were groups were springing up from the ashes, homes. Roses were blooming from the concrete. Some withered, some fell out, some survived, right? These were the two prominent groups that, of course, were surviving. So, of course, he felt that if for no other reason, he started to get at his camaradas, his carnales, and let them know. I'm speaking about Cheyenne, saying, so I was scared, we need to bring these Vatos all into the fold because shit's getting ugly. We're fighting amongst our own brown people. Kind of like how I feel. I believe I'm for the people, by the people. I believe all the people are the same, man. Nobody is different. Everyone's to be treated equal. Everyone's to get that social status of equality. We all want the same thing. That's the prosperity and the propensity to go out there and get it for our brown people and for our gente. We just want equal rights. Okay, and this is what I truly believe in. I also believe in the reforming of people that are incarcerated, you know, helping them with the stigma that's put on them when they get out. But that's neither here nor there. What is here right now is Cheyenne Cadena decided to do that, just that. And a lot of his canales weren't taking into that, meaning that they weren't adhering to that. They didn't see that same vision. Now, like I said, in the beginning, his familia laced him up to be about his culture, to be about his brown people. So that was already instilled. So that is what he set out to do. So he got at some of his canales and he told them, specifically Joe Morgan, that he was going to set up some type of meeting and conference with the Nuestra Familia leadership that was housed at Chino prison. Okay? At this time, a lot of the emeros decided, chale, this ain't gonna go down, homes. We're not gonna involve ourselves with these Vatos. These Vatos have distanced themselves from us. We are gonna keep it that way. This is the way we want it. So what happened at this time was, prior to him being transferred and facilitating this move through the administration to get to Chino so that he could set up this conference between some of the high-ranking Nuestra Familia members, the emeros moved on 2 NF members and killed them. Okay? Now this was a recipe for disaster. Disaster, Vatos. And the reason being was they already knew that their camarada, their homeboy, was on his way to Chino prison. He was actually in transport heading there when these 2 members were killed. Okay, so obviously the Norteños and the Nuestra Familia decided that if for no other reason they should retaliate. They should retaliate swiftly. And they knew that hitting someone of leadership and someone of a hierarchy and a status like Cheyenne would set a severe blow to the Emet. Okay, so this is what they decided to do. They decided to get this guy here under the guise of peace talks in order to entrap him and basically murder him. And that's exactly what went down. You know, on December 17, 1972, he was in Chino, Palm Hall, 3rd tier, when several individuals, started to run their neck. You know, you had several Norteños that were not Nuestra Familia members, but were affiliated, started to send death threats, notes, kites, huilas, palomas, missives, whatever you want to call them, and let Cheyenne know that he wouldn't be able to walk that tier first thing in the morning. So he could have been like any one of these old bummy motherfucking SNY dudes nowadays and rolled it up. He could have easily said, guard, right? And got on down the road. What do you want? I like your shoes. You like your pants. Why don't you take off your pants? He could have easily got on, but this is what wasn't the character of this man. Like I said, he was a very quiet, young warrior, but warrior was the key word, with a lot of respect. Respect for his fellow man, respect for the fellow Chicanos that were there on that tira, but more than anything, respect for himself. He had a lot of self-respect and a lot of pride. And his pride and his self-respect would not let him roll it up, PC up. When they told him, are you going to come out on the yard the next day? That vato came out on the tira, ready, right? Even knowing that he was stepping out of that cell for the last time. This was the heart of a lion. This was the heart of a true leader. This was the heart of Cheyenne Cadena, right? So as he walks out on the tier, several NF assassins, the Nuestra Familia assassins, rush him from both sides, and he is stabbed over 50 times and thrown over the tier. Now, I'm not telling this story to disrespect anybody. You know, everything I say is historical facts. So he was stabbed by several individuals 50 times and thrown over a tier. Whereas once upon landing on the tier, the Vatos went for the kill shot and he was hit a dozen more times. Right there in Chino is where he succumbed. Of course, nowadays, he is buried right there with his familia, you know, in Bakersfield, California, where he comes from. Now, at the same time, you have to understand this. That right there in itself set off a war. Okay? A lot of people that go back in the history like to think that it was an old Folsom setup, meaning it was a cold setup, that what these people did by killing these two NF members basically put them in a bad situation. And you could look at it from the outside looking in and say, yeah, possibly that could have been the case. Possibly it could have been a setup, but at the same time, one never knows, does one? What we do know, and what is a historical fact, was he was killed that day just based on where he was from, based on what he represented, and based on these Vatos not really getting along. You know, these two groups wanting to do their own thing. The separation was real. What that did, in fact, that one killing set off a trigger of events where over 31 inmates on both sides were killed within that year. Okay, it was the most bloodiest year in CDC history, 1972. There was several inmates slaughtered by both sides, as well as Aryan Brotherhood members and BGF members. The war was real, and it was going to continue to be real for another 4 to 5 decades. You know, even just prior, about not even less than 9 years ago, the Nuestra Familia and the Emero war was so real that they had each other on site. If one was to be seen on the yard, he was to be hit immediately on site. And this is where that war stemmed from. Okay, a lot of people like to say the shoe war, and yes, the shoe war is what kicked it off initially, the separation of the NF from the ME, but actually the killing of Cheyenne was what the catalyst of what sparked the flame to all-out war. Okay, no holds barred, so we're gonna get you where we want you, now we're gonna eat you type war. Okay, and there was several bodies dropped on both sides. Quite contrary to what a lot of people say, historical facts have proven that they've lost people on both sides. There's casualties of war. Okay, a lot of people like to say, well, there was only one Emero and 10 NF members that died. It doesn't matter. One is one too many. 10 is 10 too many. In life, man, if we lose one Mexicano, it's like losing part of our soul, vato. You know what I mean? We're brown. We need all our brown people. And that's the same thing that Cheyenne believed. And that's the reason why he sacrificed his life for this. That vato knew he was going to be hit on that yarda. That vato knew he was going to be hit on that tira, thrown off the tier. But at the same time, the pride, the machismo, the realness, the fucking dedication to what he truly believed in, he still came out of that cell. Not a lot of people can say that. Vatos are now rolling it up, faking heart attacks. Yay, right in the county jail because they're scared to fight white boys. I'm just saying, though. Anyways, Cheyenne Cadena was real. Absolutely real. And he succumbed to that. Now, he's a legendary figure. Of course, the movie American Me came out, I believe it was in 91, 92. And when the movie American Me came out, this Vato Santana basically portrayed, Cheyenne Cadena. Now, I know at this time I was young watching this movie. I didn't know who Cheyenne was, who this character Santana was supposed to be. I just watched it for the action. I watched it because I was intrigued by the gang reality of it. But at the same time, now looking back in retrospect, I can see there was a lot of flaws in that movie. And they did a lot of desecration on this Vato's character. Defamation of his character to the fullest. A lot of those things that they said that happened never happened. That was all Hollywood. You know, in all reality, man, this Vato, yeah, he was a youngster. Yes, he did get incarcerated at a very young age. Yes, he did have a lot of pride. Yes, he did have a lot of respect. You know what I mean? And they should have treated him with such. And because of them not treating his name and putting respect on his name, they suffered the repercussions for their actions. It happens in life. You know, that's why I say much respect to Cheyenne Cadena. There's never going to be anyone like him. You know, there's never going to be anyone, man, that could establish, you know, with just a young gaggle of a group of 5 to 6 individuals, something as strong and as powerful, an organization that still is prevalent today. It's still adhered to. It's still feared. You know, I don't like to speak on the organization too much because, Sasuke, that's not my business or my room to talk on these guys. But at the same time, man, facts are facts, and fact remains, man, that this Vato right here is a legend, not only in the Mexicano Chicano game, but also in the gang underworld, period, plain and simple, and he's to be respected. Anyways, with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this profile by Rodolfo Cheyenne Cadena, man, a real one, like I said, out of Bakersfield, California, who proceeded in such a manner, man, that no one could walk in them same shoes. He was different, you know. With that being said, my ultimate respects go out to him and his familia that still remain alive. You know what it is, man. The gun. I'm going to go ahead and sign off like that. I hope that you move fast with a purpose. I hope that you get everything that you want coming to you. Remember, a real one can always be a real one if a real one is a real one. Read between the lines, man. Do what you have to do to go out there and get it for your familia, because your familia will do what they have to do to get it for you if they're true believers in you. And only you could do for yourself. No one else could do it for you. We need all the help we can get. There's a little notification bell right there. If you want, you can tap that one time. You'll get notified of all my next spills. If not, it's all good. You can also hit that thumbs down, because heavy is the head that wears Gun's crown. And I'm going to continue to struggle and strive for what I truly believe in and give respect to those who really deserve it. The gun. Bang, bang. We ain't fucking around today. We're talking about Cheyenne.